Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. An Israeli airstrike has destroyed a building in Gaza that houses the offices of several international media outlets and residential apartments. The latest attack follows the overnight killing of 10 Palestinians, including 8 children, in an airstrike on a refugee camp. At least 140 Palestinians have been killed and over 950 wounded in relentless Israeli strikes since Monday. 13 others have been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. Large demonstrations were held in big cities around the world to condemn the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. From Brazil and Australia to Britain and Japan, tens of thousands of people rallied to denounce Israeli attacks in Gaza. The protests coincide with the 73rd anniversary of the Nakba Day, which commemorates the forced expulsion of the Palestinians during the creation of Israel in 1948. Myanmar's ruling military has accused its opponents, including civilian militias, of killing 63 people in various attacks since the coup in February. The military is struggling to impose order, and the resistance against the coup has now expanded from daily protests to attacks on security forces. Nearly 790 people have been killed in the crackdown on anti-coup protesters since the military seized power. In Pakistan, authorities have issued revised coronavirus guidelines allowing shopping malls to remain open till 8 p.m., starting from the 17th of May. All inter-provincial, inter-city and intra-city public transport will now resume from the 16th of May with 50% occupancy. The new guidelines were issued after the country recorded less than 2,000 infections for the first time since March. India, however, is still struggling to deal with the dire COVID crisis. Globally, there are over 3.3 million deaths and nearly 162 million infections. And in football, Leeds United beat Burnley 4-0 at Turf Moor to continue a strong finish to their first season back in the Premier League. They are currently on the 10th position on the points table, while Burnley are at the 15th. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. An Israeli airstrike has destroyed a building in Gaza that houses the offices of several international media outlets and residential apartments. The latest attack follows the overnight killing of 10 Palestinians, including 8 children, in an airstrike on a refugee camp. At least 140 Palestinians have been killed and over 950 wounded in relentless Israeli strikes since Monday. 13 others have been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli raids on Gaza come after weeks of mounting tension over the looming forced expulsion of Palestinian families from their homes in the occupied East Jerusalem. The situation escalated when Israeli police stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque and wounded hundreds of Palestinians during several days of violence. A meeting of the UN Security Council is scheduled for Sunday to discuss the worsening situation. OIC is also set to meet on the same day. Large demonstrations were held in big cities around the world to condemn the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. From Brazil and Australia to Britain and Japan, tens of thousands of people rallied to denounce Israeli attacks in Gaza. In Brazil, the Omar al-Bin Khattab Mosque was illuminated in the Palestinian flag in solidarity with the Gaza and Jerusalem. While in Australia, thousands marched in Sydney and hundreds in Melbourne against the Israeli aggression. In London, hundreds gathered at Hyde Park holding up banners against violence in Gaza. In the Japanese capital, Tokyo, demonstrators marched in protest against Israel's bombing of Gaza. The protests coincide with the 73rd anniversary of Nakba Day, which commemorates the forced expulsion of Palestinians during the creation of Israel in 1948. Myanmar's ruling military has accused its opponents, including civilian militias, of killing 63 people in various attacks since the coup in February. The military is struggling to impose order, and the resistance against the coup has now expanded from daily protests to attacks on security forces. Earlier, at least 2 people were killed as army clashed with civilian militias in a northwestern town for a second day. The latest violence comes after the ruling military declared a martial law to quell a local rebellion. Pro-democracy groups and ethnic armies have been rallying behind the national unity government that seeks domestic and international support. Nearly 790 people have been killed in the crackdown on anti-coup protesters since the military seized power on the 1st of February. The EU says Russia's decision to put the Czech Republic on a list of unfriendly countries undermines diplomatic relations. In a tweet, European Council's President Charles Michel termed Moscow's move as another escalatory step. Michel accused Moscow of trying to divide the European Union and said such efforts are in vain. He expressed full solidarity with the Czech Republic. Prague said limiting the number of local staff at the Czech diplomatic mission in Moscow will further escalate tensions. Czech Foreign Ministry said that the worsen ties with Russia with the EU and allies as well. Russia has listed the United States and the Czech Republic, among others, as unfriendly countries. It said the United States diplomatic missions could no longer employ local staff, while the Czech missions could employ a maximum of 19. Washington says the upcoming meeting between U.S. and Russian top diplomats aims to take bilateral ties to a more stable path. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to meet his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the Arctic Council summit. Talking to reporters, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said both leaders will discuss the entire range of bilateral issues. He said Washington can work with Moscow in areas of common interest, including climate, Iran, and North Korea. But Price said the United States will act firmly to defend its interests against Russian aggression. Russia has frozen bank accounts of a U.S. broadcaster after fining it repeatedly for allegedly breaking its foreign agent legislation. Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty says Russian bailiffs carried out an inventory of its Moscow bureau. It said the bailiffs notified it of the beginning of the proceedings over the unpaid fines. The multimedia news outlet said that it had been fined $1 million this year as part of a Russian campaign to force it out. In a briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Jelena Porter said Washington is deeply troubled by Russia's move. She said Moscow attempts to suppress independent media and deny the Russian people access to objective news. The United Nations says it seeks to enhance cooperation with Russia in supporting global peace and stability. The UN statement comes after Secretary General Antonio Guterres concluded his 3-day trip to Moscow. During his visit, Guterres met with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Talking to reporters, UN Chief Spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric said the Secretary General expressed interest to deepen the cooperation with Russia in 3 pillars of the UN's work. These include peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. Earlier, Russia reiterated its commitment to strengthening UN's leading role in international affairs. India has recorded nearly 3,900 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 326,000 cases over the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.3 million lives and infected more than 161.5 million people. More in this report.
The coronavirus outbreak situation in India remains worrisome as vaccination drives in states stumble. Over the past week, the South Asian nation recorded 1.7 million new cases and more than 20,000 deaths. Supplies are short, and the demand for medicine is overwhelming pharmacies and causing the prices of drugs and equipment to skyrocket. The price of oximeter has more than doubled to $20 from $8.
Demand for oxygen generation is very high recently. It's the first time for me to know that there are oxygen generators on the market. It's almost impossible to buy them in the formal market. Even if someone who urgently needs it got it after trying many ways, the price must be very high, maybe around hundreds of thousands of rupees.
In an attempt to contain the fast-spreading Indian strain that may delay the UK's full reopening, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the country will accelerate its vaccination program. Meanwhile, as the COVID-19 outbreak finally got under control in Slovakia, the government has ended its 8-month state of emergency. But over in the Americas, the situation remains grim. With the world's second highest death toll, Brazil reported more than 2,200 fatalities and over 85,000 cases in the past 24 hours. In Colombia, the death count passed the 80,000 mark with intensive care units almost full in the biggest cities.
We are still in a very difficult situation. The mathematics with the virus is brutal. We had gone up with the infections, we had a time when it started to go down, and then from April 27th, cases went up again. We are going to have at least 2 weeks of pressure on intensive care units.
The small island in the Indian Ocean, Seychelles, has vaccinated 60% of its population, but infections are still rising. The Health Ministry says of the current 2,700 cases, 33% have been fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, Taiwan has raised its alert level in the capital Taipei and the city around it, bringing curbs for a period of 2 weeks. For the first time, masks will have to be worn outdoors.
In Pakistan, authorities have issued revised guidelines, including extended opening hours for shops after a meeting on the coronavirus situation in the country. Under the new guidelines, all inter-provincial, intra-city and intra-city public transport will resume from the 16th of May with 50% occupancy. Railways will maintain its operation with 70% occupancy. The new guidelines were issued after the country recorded less than 2,000 infections for the first time since March. So far, the country has recorded 19,467 deaths and nearly 875,000 cases since the first case was reported last year in February. The World Bank has recognized Pakistan's EHSAAS program among the top 4 social protection interventions globally. According to the World Bank's latest report, over 100 million people have been covered in the COVID-related cash transfer scheme. The report stated that a relief package worth $7.8 billion was announced by the federal government in March, which has been almost fully implemented. Under the program, the government of Pakistan allocated over $1.2 billion to deliver emergency cash assistance to 15 million families at risk of poverty. Ethiopia's electoral body has postponed parliamentary elections due on the 5th of June. The National Electoral Board says that it does not foresee a delay in more than just 3 weeks. The country was originally scheduled to hold the vote in August last year, but it was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since then, there has been conflict in the northern Tigray region, which will not take part in the voting. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed faces challenges from ethnically based parties seeking more power for their regions. Turkey says its armed forces have killed 3 more PKK militants during anti-terror operations in northern Iraq. In a tweet, Turkish Defense Ministry said Turkish Air Force killed the militants in a raid in the Metina region of Iraq. It said the offensive was part of the Klot-Simsk operation. Turkish forces have so far killed over 70 PKK militants over the various operations in Iraq. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pakistan's meteorological department says cyclone TAUKTAE is expected to affect Sindh province coastal regions next week. It said the storm is nearly 1,500 kilometers south of Karachi, with maximum winds of 90 kilometers per hour. It added that widespread rains are likely in Karachi, Hyderabad, Jamshoro, and other areas between May 18th and the 20th. The Indian Weather Department has issued a red alert for 5 districts of the Kerala state in the wake of the cyclone. The storm is expected to intensify and will make landfall on the western coast on Monday. At least 10 people have died and over 300 are injured after 2 tornadoes ripped through China's Hubei and Jiangsu provinces. The state media says 27 houses completely collapsed while 130 were damaged. The tornado blew down power lines, triggering an outage that affected over 26,000 households in Wuhan. Meanwhile, China's commercial hub of Shanghai was also hit by a powerful thunderstorm. Shanghai authorities have sounded an alert over the situation. Rescue and cleanup operations are underway in the afflicted areas. China says it has successfully landed the country's first unmanned spacecraft on the surface of Mars. The Chinese mission aims to study the red planet's topography, signs of ancient life, and the presence of water and ice. The state media says the Tianwen-1 spacecraft landed on a site on a vast plain known as Utopia Planitia. A rover aboard the spacecraft will survey the landing site before departing from its platform to conduct tests and inspections. China has become the second country after the United States to land a spacecraft on the red planet. Kasir Javed has become the second female Muslim MP after she held the Westminster seat of Airdrie and Shotts for the Scottish National Party in Thursday's by-election. Kasir Javed is a 28-year-old modern studies teacher who was a Liberal activist until the independence referendum in 2014. Her victory brings the number of SNP lawmakers in the Commons back to 45. The by-election was held after MP Neil Gray resigned in order to stand in last week's Scottish Parliament election. The SNP has won a landslide victory in the election. An oil painting from Pablo Picasso has sold for over $100 million at a Christie's auction house in New York. Picasso's portrait of his French lover Marie Theresa vastly exceeded its pre-sale estimate of $55 million. The painting, captioned "Woman by the Window," was completed in 1932. The same painting was acquired only 8 years ago at a London sale for nearly $45 million. Christie's head of modern art department Keith Gill called the portrait an incredibly iconic image. The artwork was sold after 19 minutes of bidding. This marks the 5th work by Picasso to have sold for more than $100 million. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Britain and Ireland have agreed to work together to maintain smooth post-Brexit trade between them. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Irish counterpart Michael Martin discussed the matter during a meeting at Chequers. In a statement, Johnson's office said the two agreed on the importance of working together to uphold the Good Friday Agreement. Both sides regretted that the families of Ballymurphy massacre victims had to wait so long for the truth. The office said Johnson reiterated London's commitment to finding a way forward in the Northern Ireland issue that delivers for victims. The statement read the two resolved to continue to work together in the fight against the coronavirus to enable a better recovery. The United States, Mexico, and Canada are set to hold their first formal talks on their continental trade deal next week. Trade ministers from the three countries will virtually discuss the deal, which took effect in July 2020. In a statement, the U.S. Trade Representative's office says the talks will particularly focus on labor and environmental obligations. It said the ministers will receive updates about work underway to advance cooperation. This comes as the United States is reviewing tariffs, which may lead to the inflation in the country. The move is expected to affect hundreds of billions of dollars in trade. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at intus.news.